So good morning. Today we're here to share some specific information about unemployment insurance. As there have been a few changes here recently, and these changes impact a broad range of people. So right now I want to show you just where we are today with unemployment and in our economy. Our economy is a lot different now than it was this time last year. Last year, our unemployment insurance rate stood at 11.2%. Now that was down from the 16.9 high that we reached back in April of last year. Today, as we just reported this morning, our unemployment rate is 4.1%. Now we've seen some positive swings in areas like leisure and hospitality and manufacturing. There have been some minor fluctuations here and there in our monthly unemployment rate. Much of that is due to individuals who are seeking work, but they've not yet landed the job of their choice. So we're moving in the right direction. So as we move in this positive direction, our goal at the DWD is to ensure that every unemployment insurance claimant receives the benefits to which he or she is eligible, and to provide training and tools and job opportunity. Those goals remain the same. Now let's take a look back from March 2020. We've provided about $8.6 billion in benefits to about 875,000 individuals. That's more than the previous 5 years combined. Now on average, claimants have received approximately $10,600 in unemployment insurance benefits. Now, I'm proud of the work that our team has done throughout this pandemic in helping people receive the benefits for which they're eligible. Now, being proud doesn't mean that there were not challenges. Getting to where we are today came with some challenges. Some challenges in administration of high volume claims and dollars. We've overcome some of those challenges, only for new ones to pop up, or for old ones to even change their complexion. You'll hear about some of those today. Specifically, today, we want to focus on a few things. So let's turn our attention to those. First, we'll talk about the restart of federal programs. Then we'll talk a little bit about unemployment insurance overpayments. And then we'll talk a little bit about fraud. So here with me today is Regina Ashley. She's our Chief Unemployment Insurance Officer. And I'll turn it over to Regina right now.
Good morning. Let's look at the restart of the federal insurance programs first. DWD is restarting the 3 federal unemployment insurance programs. Those include the $300 weekly add-on, that's called the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Program, or FPUC. Also, the benefits to independent contractors, gig workers, and those otherwise not eligible for unemployment, referred to as the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA program. Third, the extension of benefits beyond the normal 26 weeks, called the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program, or PEUC. These programs will be retroactive to week ending June 26th. In unemployment insurance, we speak in terms of week endings because that's how claimants get paid. The last payments made under these programs were for week ending June 19th, which is why we are restarting with week ending June 26th. This means there will be no gap in payments for eligible claimants. Claimants were able to request weekly payments beginning yesterday. In fact, as of this morning, we've already paid 25,000 claimants on PUA and PEUC over $33 million. This includes the $300 add-on. Now I want to turn to a topic called unemployment insurance overpayments. First, I do want to clarify, Indiana does have an overpayment waiver program for the pandemic programs. We have had a process in place to address pandemic overpayments since November of 2020. Our 2 neighboring states, Ohio and Kentucky, are also hard at work getting their waiver programs launched. So what is an overpayment? An overpayment is when an individual is paid more benefits than he or she should have been paid. Unfortunately, overpayments are a normal part of the unemployment insurance process. One of the most common reasons for an overpayment is when a person fails to report all wages on their weekly request for payment to DWD or other errors. DWD notifies claimants if it's determined that they received an overpayment. The person then can appeal that determination. Additionally, and this is important, the claimant can also request a waiver. Yes, Indiana does have a waiver program, and it applies to the regular program as well as the federal pandemic programs. All claimants are notified about the waiver process on their overpayment notice that they receive from the department. There's also information on the waiver process on the DWD website and in the COVID FAQs. If a claimant appeals or if they request a waiver, there will be no attempts to collect the overpayment until those processes are resolved.
So at this point, I want to shift our attention to an unfortunate but yet familiar character. That's fraud. I'm still amazed about the scope and the persistence of this culprit, of fraud. We've implemented a variety of measures to block and to avoid fraudulent payments going out. We know that unfortunately, some of these necessary measures have caused inconvenience and delay to some legitimate claimants. But I want to take a moment here this morning to share with you just where we are and how things have gone. We enhanced our identity verification processes back in the summer of 2020, and we've continued to enhance them since that time. To date, about 27% of individuals who've attempted to verify their identity through ID.me, who is our vendor that we use to verify identification, have been found to be fraudulent. Additionally, we've multiple cross matches in place with our data that we use with other states to see if an individual is filing for unemployment benefits in more than one state. Now, we're also using technology that allows us to both track and prevent attacks to our system by sophisticated bots. Since November of 2020, our IT system has blocked more than 26 million attempts to use bots to attack and penetrate our unemployment system. Now, while no measure is foolproof, we've been able to avoid a lot of fraud penetration. I want to give you a couple of examples. You likely know someone who's been a victim of unemployment insurance identity theft in the U.S. during the pandemic, or at the very least you've heard. Right now you're looking at one. Someone used my information to file for unemployment insurance benefits. Now imagine how I felt when I was informed that someone had used my information to file for benefits. Now fortunately, our systems blocked it. There were no payments made. But it didn't stop there. It happened to my spouse about 2 weeks later. The fraudsters don't stop. But our system protected us. You may have also heard about individuals who have received debit cards for unemployment insurance benefits that they had never filed for benefits for. In fact, a good citizen from South Carolina received more than 10 Indiana debit cards with various names on them. I have them right here. I have them face down to protect the information of the names of the people who are on them. This individual in South Carolina promptly sent these cards to us. The good news is that our fraud prevention measures work. No payment was made out on these cards. No payments were ever deposited on those cards. Because of the measures we put in place, we prevented over $236 million in fraudulent identity theft payments alone. Now, at this point, we have paid out about $8.1 million in fraud benefits. We'll probably see those numbers change and grow over time. But this is just an example of how we're trying to ensure that we're protecting our system against the fraudsters. We know that it may cause some inconvenience, but we're also making sure that we protect the integrity of the process. At this point, I like to remind individuals of a scam that continues to go out there. This is the scam regarding text messaging. There are fraudulent text messages that are going out. These appear to be from the DWD asking for information about an individual's username so that they can get into their unemployment insurance account. Please know that the DWD does not send text messages about unemployment insurance. Keep in mind, as I've mentioned many times before, the public, the employers, and individuals are still our number one defense against fraud. So please continue to work with us as we continue to work through fraud. Now, in closing, I like to say as we continue to move forward with our unemployment insurance processing, we want to make sure that we're paying every individual who's eligible the benefits that they deserve. But we have to stay diligent in ensuring that we're also providing tools and resources necessary for each person to reach his or her next level. We want individuals to achieve economic mobility and opportunity. Our education and job training programs, which include our Workforce Ready Grant and Employer Training Grant programs, provide training for individuals in high-wage, high-demand jobs. To learn more about how to access these programs and to get connected to the education and training to lead you or someone you love or care about to their job or career of choice, please visit nextleveljobs.org. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we're going to start the questions. First up, Nikki Kelly, Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette.
Hi, thanks for having this. And can you guys clarify how many people are impacted by the repayments, specifically by the, I guess, reinstituting the federal program, trying to figure out how many people dropped off when you halted it and might be coming back on?
Sure. I think at the last week of June, we had approximately 120,000 individuals that were filing for either PEUC, the extended program, or PUA, a little heavier on the extended benefit PEUC program. And so far, just in one day, we've already paid 25,000 people.
Brandon Smith, Indiana Public Radio.
Good morning. I have a couple quick questions here. For one, let's start with PUA. If people aren't able and available to work due to having a health risk or having issues with child care, Department of Labor guidance seems to say that that's still acceptable. Is Indiana following that policy?
PUA is a federal program, so we followed the federal program on that. The application has all of the federal COVID reasons, and they have to have one each week to be eligible for that week.
And then similarly with PEUC, the recent FAQ document says people need to have a COVID-19 related issue to be eligible, but that seems to contradict the DOL guidance. So what is Indiana's policy with that program?
So the COVID-19 related reason is for PUA. PEUC is an extension of the federal benefits program, so that would fall under the UA program guidance. So if there isn't, and actually in the FAQs, we will correct that. We will check that.
Eric Berman, WIBC.
Hi, good morning. I have a couple of questions about the federal add-on, and if there's time, I have a question about the waiver program. For people who were unemployed on June 26th but have since found work, do they still receive the retroactive benefits? And secondly, my understanding is that the department was not waiting for the Court of Appeals ruling. The department had been working to get those restarted. Can you elaborate on why it took 3 weeks to get those restarted?
I'll talk about that. So once we received the judge's ruling, as you may recall, the judge's ruling in a case indicated that we were to continue the program. But at that time, the program had already stopped. So in order to try to make sure that we were following the wishes of what we thought was the essence of the court's decision, we reached out to the U.S. Department of Labor. And we had been working with them since that time to really get a process in place and a good understanding on how we could effectuate that.
Will the retroactive payments apply to people who are no longer on the rolls?
Go right ahead.
Sorry.
No, go right ahead.
Yes, so it is a week-by-week, UI is a week-by-week system, so you submit a weekly voucher. So if you were impacted but back on June 26th but are now back to work, you would file a voucher for that week only.
And not to monopolize this, but regarding the waiver process, Ohio and Kentucky have not only inaugurated a waiver process, but have sent letters saying, hey, we encourage you to file for this. Will Indiana be doing something similar?
So we, from the start of our waiver program, when we send them their determination and their overpayment notice, in that notification, they have information on the waiver process. We're always looking for good ideas, so we are contemplating that, also doing some outreach to claimants.
Bob Siegel, WTHR.
Good morning. Thank you for taking our questions. Commissioner Payne, you mentioned this morning we want to pay everyone who is eligible and make sure that they get the claims they're entitled to. That's the same thing that you said 6 months ago when I asked you the last time I had a chance to ask you a question. And yet we are hearing, again, every day, not just WTHR, but I know the other media in town, from hundreds, if not thousands of people still waiting to get their claims, in some cases 6, 8, 12 months later. So my question for you is not just these folks who have not gotten back benefits over the last month, but for those other folks, how many claims are still unresolved and pending for the state of Indiana? How many claimants are represented by those claims? And how large right now is the backlog of cases waiting for appeals? Because we know there are individuals who have waited 6 or 8 months just to get an appeal hearing.
Sure. Good question. I'm going to start off by saying this. My response 6 months ago is the same as it is today. We do want to make sure that we're paying every eligible Hoosier. That is our goal, and that is what we'll continue to do. Now, in terms of someone waiting 6 months or more, that population is extremely small. So we have processed more than 90-something% of the claims that have come through our shop. So more than 90%. If there's someone who's waiting beyond 21 days, there are some complications with their matter. So we're going to continue to work through those, and we're going to give them the attention that they need. And if they're eligible, they will receive the benefits that they are eligible for. I don't know if you want to pick up on some more of that.
Sure. So, you mentioned the word backlog. I'd say we do not have a backlog. As claims come in, we are processing those claims in the timeframes that we were pre-pandemic. The ones that take longer, that might get beyond the 21 days, are those where we have an employer involved and they're protesting, and we have to give due process to both the claimant and the employer. So we have to give them both an opportunity to tell us their side of the story. Also ones where we have indicators of fraud. We get lots of information from lots of different sources, employers being one of them, and when we get that information, we have to then act upon that information.
And one I want to make sure I expound on the answer. And when we talk about the appeals piece, just want to make sure we put it in context. Our appeals process right now, we do have quite a high volume. But our appeals right now, we're about 12 to 18 weeks?
So we are on
For the
PUA claims. We're actually a little bit lower than that. We're back to sort of pre-pandemic timeframes for the PUA program. Those are a little bit easier appeals. There's one party involved. There's not an employer. The issues aren't as complex. For our regular UI program, depending on the issue type, those appeals are taking longer.
And I do understand the department has claimed on multiple times that 90% are being paid within 21 days, which is great, and the department says that's how it's supposed to be working. But we continue to hear, I understand from the department's perspective, it might be a small number, but these are the folks that we're hearing from every single day. And I spoke to a woman this morning, her name's Amanda Cloud. She has talked to Andrea, Jalen, Sydney, Bernard, Erica, Rebecca, Rihanna, all these people over the last 11 months to try to get her claim. It's not even to appeals yet. She has not even gotten her claim to an investigator, and she's been told that it's been with an investigator for at least 3 months, she's still waiting. So what do you tell those folks who have tried everything they can think of to get through to the department, to be able to get answers? Who should these folks talk to? What systems in place for these folks to be able to get their cases expedited? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, we are working through every single case that we can, and you've given me a person's name. We'll follow up with this person's claim. It's a little difficult for us to address individual claims in a meeting like this because they are so fact-intensive. So all I can say is I make the commitment, as we made before, that every person will receive the benefits for which they're eligible, and we are working as diligently as we can to move through them as quickly as possible.
Emily Ketterer, IBJ. Okay, thanks, Emily. Bing from the Indy Star.
Thank you for holding this. I have two questions. One is, as this case moves through the court, if the state ultimately prevails, are you going to be asking people to pay the benefits back? That's my first question. And the second is, can you explain the steps you took to remove yourself from the federal program and what it took to get back on, so we understand why there's this 2-3 week gap between those two things? So if you can answer those questions.
So the first question, for benefits for which people are eligible and they're paid, those are benefits that are theirs. We're not going to be seeking any reimbursement for payments that an individual ended up legitimately receiving. So that's the answer to the first question.
So even if the state prevails in court, there's going to be no seeking of payments back?
Those benefits will have already been paid to that individual. And the process that we went through, again, I won't have a whole lot of comments on continued litigation, but the process that we went through to end up starting payments or restarting payments began when the judge's order came out and we reached out to the U.S. Department of Labor. Because the decision requested or stated that we should not stop the program, again, the program had already been stopped. So at that point, we did not even have the ability to draw down federal funding. So we had to make sure that we were engaged with the USDOL. So we went through a series of discussions with the USDOL to make sure that we could effectuate the judge's order. And that's what took some time going back and forth. And so to restart it, it did take, some IT lifts. There are some administrative things that we had to go through. And again, I think we started back up, 2 days ago with vouchers being ready for individuals.
Thank you.
Jamin Miner, Wish TV.
Good morning. Thank you guys so much for holding this. I think a lot of people have asked us for transparency, and this is definitely what we want. My questions is more focused on the repayment process. So we've heard from, over 800 people claiming that they are having to repay in full their unemployment benefits. And these are not people that are saying it was fraud. They're saying they got their documents in on time, they met their deadlines, and yet they're still having to pay some tens of thousands of dollars. So I just want to get a very clear answer from you guys is, are you going to waive those who were eligible for their unemployment benefits, got everything in on their deadline, got other documents in, but are still saying, getting that letter, that they have to pay $10,000, $11,000 back?
Yes, if there's an individual who received overpayment and they provided us with a waiver or they've appealed it, we've stopped any type of attempts, okay? So individuals who have legitimately provided us with documentation and they filled out the waiver, the answer to the question is generally no. Now, I can't comment on a specific matter because if a specific individual has some fact-intensive issues that throws off everything I just said, then that's a little bit different. But each one of those cases would be handled on a fact-by-fact basis. But generally speaking, if there is a legitimate overpayment and it falls within one of our waiver provisions, then that person will not be asked or be required to pay back any money.
Does there need to be some clarification from the department? A lot of people who filed for unemployment last year did it for the very first time. And we've heard from people who one small error in their documents or their filling out their forms cause them to either lose an appeal or have to be forced to pay quite a bit of money, sometimes an entire year's salary of what they actually made. So is there something that needs to be done where people can really understand what is exactly needed so that they do not have to pay that kind of money?
Sure. We're always refining our processes, and we do take suggestions from the public on all of that. But again, if an individual has made a simple mistake in terms of, and we can verify that it's not fraud, then there's a process in place for that, and we'll continue to follow that process. We want to make sure that when we're going after overpayments, we only want to go after overpayments that, people did not legitimately receive. So we're not in the business of trying to be, overly burdensome to individuals. And we do know that we can continue to refine our processes and to make those easier for individuals, and we'll continue to do that. And any information that you have that could help us do that, we'd appreciate it.
Regina, question for you. You mentioned the waiver system that's been in place for a while, but when I looked at the back of some of the repayment letters and I saw that description of the waiver system, it doesn't specifically say pandemic unemployment. So is that something that you guys are going to clarify with people? Because I think a lot of people didn't realize they could also, too, file to have their pandemic unemployment waived.
So if you look at the form you're looking at, the notice of repayment, you'll see up in the corner it says claim type, and so it would say PUA. So that they're getting that for the PUA program. But we understand that, sometimes the government is not easily understood, so we can absolutely do some clarifications on that.
Kristen Eska, Fox 59.
Good morning. Just wanted to clarify something that was mentioned earlier. You talked about going back and forth with the Labor Department to get back into the program. But was DWD waiting on the Court of Appeals decision to resume the payments?
We were working with the U.S. Department of Labor. We had, like I said, from day one when we got the decision, we ended up reaching out to them, and we were going back and forth on just how we could effectuate that. The litigation has a different track than what we were doing within our agency on a day-to-day basis.
And just to clarify about the back payments, will back payments be issued all at once? And how long are those claims going to take to get processed?
Sure. So unemployment insurance is a week-by-week request, so they have to submit their voucher for that week, saying that they were in fact unemployed or partially unemployed for that week. So once they submit the request for those weeks, they'll be processed. So as we said yesterday, we had 25,000 claimants come in. The vast majority of those filed for all 3 weeks, and the vast majority of them had no issues on their claims, and they were paid this morning.
So then to clarify, is that going to be multiple vouchers of one voucher per week they have to fill out?
Yes, that's how the unemployment insurance system works. Each week you have to verify that you're unemployed. Sure.
Thanks for attending.